So welcome, everyone. This session is called Towards Feminist Futures and Beyond, and we're very excited to have Ivana and Clara here today. And this is part of a larger event created by Abril and I called Women Who Futures. And this event emerged from our desire to create safe spaces where we could exchange, promote, and celebrate the work of women in futures and foresight. So we wanted to showcase a diversity of approaches that women are taking in their work in this field and reflect how women's identities, intersectional identities, inform their practice, and then find new ways to also articulate feminism and gender in futures and foresight. So we have an amazing lineup of speakers, panelists, facilitators from all kinds of backgrounds, and you can take a look at the program at Luma and see what else you want to join because there are so many incredible sessions in both days. Um,
You can see, I put on here. Okay.
and yes, sorry. um, so yeah, we have an amazing lineup of speakers. And when you participate in this event, you agree to our code of conduct or code of behavior that I'm going to put in the chat right now. We have zero tolerance to any form of discrimination. So this is meant to be a safe and enjoyable space for everyone to exchange ideas and to respect each other for our different opinions and perspectives. And yeah, now it is my pleasure to hand it over to Ivana and to Clara. Welcome. Feel free to introduce yourselves and take it over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thais. First, I would like to thank you and Avril and congratulate you on this event. I would also like to greet many of my friends, especially the ones who got up really early, who are based in Europe. So thank you so much for being here. And, this is very exciting, an exciting event for us to come together and share ideas. I just want to start with the session because we were brainstorming what the session will be. And then I had 3 proposals for the session. And then finally, I think somehow this one came into play. And then I remember we were in the car driving and I thought, who put these feminist futures and beyond? Who put it? Who changed it? Because I had 3 other titles as well. Because how can we even go beyond feminist futures if we are barely there? And then I added this beyond feminist futures, towards feminist futures, so that we are going there and then wanting to delete and beyond. But because I grew up in a socialist country, and there was no beyond the end of history. There was this vision for the future that was the end of history. And we hear that in the futures area as well, the way future is often colonized, that there is nothing beyond this technological vision often for the future. So I thought, let's keep it, so that we are open to actually having our own assumptions and our own worldviews challenged. So this is how this session came into being. And Clara and myself, we were discussing about saying something, what we've done a lot. This is a 90-minute session, so we will have some food for thought, a little bit of content. And then we are hoping collectively to apply 2 futures methods on a particular topic. We'll decide what that is, the futures triangle and causal layer analysis. So that will be kind of a joint activity in the last, let's say, 40 minutes by all of us. But in the beginning, we will have some, as I said, some content, something to think about. And now I would like to pass it on to Clara to say something about research she's done, her thesis, current involvement, current focus, and then I'll go back after that again. Thanks.
Thank you, Ivana, and hello, everyone. I am joining today from Berlin, Germany. And first of all, I also would like to thank Thais and April for realizing this fantastic event. And of course, I want to thank Ivana for inviting me to speak here. So I'm Clara Justin-Morisse from Germany. My academic background is in international relations and gender and queer studies. And my professional background is in strategic foresight. So I worked for 5 years now at a consultancy in Germany, Cologne, Future Impacts, which is founded and directed by Cornelia Daheim, who maybe some of you might know. And in that context, I was also involved in projects related to the future of human rights or the future of gender equality. And yes, today I have, I think, 10 to 15 minutes to speak about feminist futures and about feminist foreign policy, because this is my current research project. So, Ivana, should I start already, or should we do the introductions?
I think we did get people to introduce themselves
great.
briefly. So we are from all over the place. Like Jeannie, I'm also based in Manjin or Brisbane. Some of you are from Portland. Welcome, Nina. Some of you are hi. Some of you are in Mexico. Some of you are in Portugal. So that's what I'm looking. Malaysia as well. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Paris as well. So lots of people. And Charmaine from Melbourne. Lovely. Welcome, everybody. Am I missing somebody? I was thinking, because this is for us to connect. The way I understand these sessions, we should be connecting. So if you want to say something, and if you want to be visually, because women should be seen and heard. Women should be seen and heard. So I understand some people have childcare duties, and that's fine. But if you want to say something now on the topic or why you're here, please unmute yourself and or raise your hand and just say something if you want. Or we can just continue with the content. It's up to you. Nope. Everybody is sleepy or shy. That's okay. Then
I think
then
I
everybody's
won't be
we'll
shy,
continue.
Ivana. I'll just say I'd like to say that I have nothing to say.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's
a
a
long
place
week.
to be too. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. No, I'm very excited to be here, and I like Clara, your introduction and talking about feminist foreign policy. So I think today's going to be really interesting for me, especially since I have my own project going on, and that Ivana's been part of to a degree on looking at international relations and futures of China and the US and Asia and things like that. So yeah, I think this will be really, really good to bring those things into it. So yeah.
Saving the world, yeah?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, who's gonna do it? Right? Who's gonna do it, right?
Somebody needs to clean up this mess, yeah? So Clara, do you want to say something about how are we to clean up this mess by using feminist lens?
Well, I can try at least. So yeah, just to flag in the beginning, this is just an attempt to give you a really general overview of a really, really complex topic. And if you have any questions, please ask me after my talk. We have plenty of time for discussions later. So how it all started. I got interested in feminist futures and in also feminist informed foresight practice a few years ago when I did my bachelor thesis, which I wrote on the linkage of feminism and future studies. And I found two things in this research, which I would like to share with you today. First of all, although feminism within future studies is a niche field, it is increasingly visible, and there are so many great initiatives, projects, events, just like this today happening, which is great. And there's, of course, this really huge body of knowledge behind all these visions, and I think Ivana will talk also a lot about this later. Then, second of all, in feminism or gender studies, where I also come from, the tools of foresight are not really well known. And also in day-to-day feminist work, especially in political work, there's a lot of this mode firefighting. So there are problems which have to be addressed, and there's not necessarily always the time to really think about the big visions. So my intention now with my research, with my master thesis, is to bring both fields together, feminism and future studies, and really create a feminist informed foresight project. And I found the perfect topic for that, which is feminist foreign policy. And I'm going to tell you now why this is the perfect topic. But first, in detail, I exploring the future of feminist foreign policy. So I am conducting qualitative interviews with experts from feminist civil society, so from women's organizations, human rights organizations, and I asked them what they think about the future of feminist foreign policy. I asked them about the vision and also about challenges that they think will be ahead. And I'm at the very start of my research, so I just did a few interviews. So I can't tell you all about it now, but it has been really interesting so far. Yeah, and I thought it's a good occasion to share something about feminist foreign policy here today, because it has a lot to do with feminist futures. To start, so what is the feminist vision for foreign policy? So to understand where we're heading, let's first explore where we've come from. The feminist vision for foreign policy is not new. It's been here a long time. It's originated from women's movements, from peace movements, also from academic interventions, feminist interventions in the fields of peace and security studies, IR, international relations, political sciences. And over time, it has evolved and it draws insight from various feminisms, especially from intersectionality and also pacifist feminism. And this vision of feminist foreign policy, or this feminist vision for foreign policy, let me say it that way, really comes from a critique of the way things are done right now in foreign policy. So foreign policy then and now is a deeply hierarchical and gendered domain. There's many wealthy white men doing it, and it's also based on respective structures. So there's really gendered and oppressive ideas about peace, about traditional politics, about security in there. And this feminist vision tries to give an alternative to this way of doing things. And at its core, it really tries to challenge ideas about the state, the nation state, the military, and it tries to address the root causes of conflict. Yeah, for example, poverty, oppression, racism, and also gender inequalities. And central aim of this vision is really peace and equality for everyone. But the question is how it is to be achieved, right? And I'm quoting now one of the most widely used definitions for feminist foreign policy, which is feminist foreign policy seeks to disrupt colonial, racist, patriarchal, and male-dominated power structures. And I would like to illustrate this by giving you a few examples. So this vision for foreign policy challenges conventional understandings of security, militarization, and the necessity of war. So it rejects this idea that war is the natural state of the world and of human nature as well. And it also rejects the notion of war as a means to achieve peace. Also questions the idea of weapons as a symbol of strength. And it also recognizes that security also is a deeply gendered concept. So the idea that we have of security right now doesn't address everyone. Not everyone feels safe, also in peaceful times, especially women, queer people, and other marginalized groups. And the feminist vision here is to really propose that peace is maybe the natural state, and that militarization and arms trade really perpetuate the system of war and conflict. And maybe that peace has to be defined in new terms. Then also, the feminist vision for foreign policy says a lot about peace and peace building. So peace building is seen as really this crucial concept, and equality and justice, and also gender equality, are seen as preconditions for peace and security for everyone. And especially the long-term success of these peace building initiatives really depend on communities embracing them, especially women peace builders on the ground. So the feminist vision for foreign policy really believes that you have to invest in women's skills for peace building to make peace really long lasting. So these are just a few examples to illustrate that. And I think it's still quite a bit abstract, right? So I wanted to put it more in concrete terms. And I dare to imagine this world now where the feminist vision for foreign policy is existent, maybe. Could be a world without weapons and arms trade, without the nuclear bomb, where peace building efforts really prioritize inclusivity and also local voices of women's organizations. Where also resources that are now putting into the military are diverted away from it and put into civil purposes, into health, education, and so on. Also, a world where former colonizing countries would confront their colonial legacies and redistribute wealth. And of course, climate change would be tackled seriously. And I believe there are many, many more details to this vision. And you could even say maybe it's an utopia. And I let that sink in now for a second, because this is really a great vision, right? Well, the problem really comes with the reality and the implementation and execution, because what we see here right now happening, which is not really surprising maybe, is that states now have taken these feminist visions and created their own interpretations of what a feminist foreign policy looks like. And needless to say, it really doesn't reflect this vision I just talked about. So what happened is that in 2015, Sweden, as first country, invented or adopted a feminist foreign policy. And since then, many countries have followed its example, both in the global south and in the global north. So for example, also Germany, France as well, Canada, also Mexico, Libya, and some other countries. I think we are around maybe 10 countries now, and there are some others who announced their intent to implement. And these feminist foreign policies that exist right now really cover only the mainstream areas of feminist foreign policy, which is aid, development, cooperation, and diplomacy, often, not all of them, but many. And they're really based on the 3 pillars, which are rights, resources, and representation. So you could really say that this is kind of an idea of bringing like gender mainstreaming into these mainstream areas of foreign policy, but it's not really transformative, right? These policies do not challenge understandings of peace, security, and war I just talked about, or other relevant concepts. So there's a lot of criticism directed towards these state feminist foreign policies from feminists. And they really say that states just use the label feminism for their image, basically, and they lack a genuine commitment to these true feminist principles, because these policies, as they're right now, they're not intersectional, not queer inclusive, not really power critical, and anti-militaristic as well. So, and I could go on with this list, right? And talking about feminist criticism now, we see also that there is kind of a power struggle over the dominance and the meaning also of this feminist vision happening. And there's also the struggle, I think, to maintain this vision and not to get it like faded out, so to say, by state practice. And this is, I think, a struggle that happens specifically between state actors and also feminist civil society, so women's organizations that are not so visible, that are not necessarily invited to consultations with the government. And circling back to my research now, I had a really interesting interview a few weeks ago, and my interviewee, she said that she believes that feminist foreign policy really is, or the feminist vision, so to say, is really a revolutionary concept. And she said when implemented right, it really is nothing less but a revolution. And I find that really interesting, inspiring, and shows that this utopian perspective is really kind of existent and there's so much possibility right now. And I also noticed that there's really a discourse, a vivid discourse happening on these vision in the context of feminist foreign policy, if you will, and also in the context of feminist futures. And in detail in my research, which is again just at the start, I want to explore really how this vision holds up, especially in a world facing numerous crises. We have, for example, climate change, right-wing populism, especially also here in Europe, anti-gender movement, and also less funding for women's organizations, for example, all these crises, so to say. And I want to ask, does this vision need to adapt to these trends and the world of the future? And also, if feminist foreign policy, if really genuinely implemented, is it capable of addressing those crises? These are just some questions I would like to further explore. There, I have many more.
Thank you so much, Clara. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much. We can continue, yeah, with this. There's so much to say, and there have been fabulous resources here. When I was listening to you, I got reminded of work by Marilyn Lake in her seminal Worlding Women, when she said that when they interviewed women and men, they got a very different definition and understanding of security. So security by women was usually defined as security from domestic violence, security of income, security of having some sort of food to put on tables, security on the street. So it was a very different concept of security than national security. And from there, we've seen the whole area develop towards human security issues rather than national security. But, you know, security is hijacked by patriarchal worldview. And feminist worldview has always challenged that. I don't think feminism gets enough credit for being one of the most profound peaceful revolutions of the 20th century. It is a revolution, it was a revolution, but it was a non-violent revolution. And because patriarchal mindset, again, says that all revolutions have to be violent, feminist movements and change, and as you say, in gender mainstreaming, in foreign policy, are not even recognized to be part of this global revolution that we experienced throughout the 20th century. So that is, to me, always fascinating. And some of you may know that, you know, I've done quite a bit of work in this area because of my own personal background, being born in a country that kind of disappeared through violence, the former Yugoslavia, and then seeing, you know, deja vu everywhere I go, like people keep on repeating similar patterns of behaving and not getting out of that. Here in Australia, we were fortunate to have a leader that I think was embodiment of feminist foreign policy, Jacinta Ardern. And now what happened, unfortunately, there are pendulum shifts. And unfortunately now, whatever she's introduced is being rewound by new governments. So some kind of developments, progressive developments that she initiated, compassionate revolution. I mean, everything she was the compassionate leadership, the way she dealt with Christchurch massacre was absolutely mind-blowing, because we've seen how many states cannot deal with that type of provocation by the other. And then they actually make everything 100 times worse. We see it all over the world. And I think I've argued in many of my articles that these human-human relationships need to be fixed, as well as human nature, because feminism is not just about laundry list of women's issues. And it's not about counting women and having equal representations. It goes much deeper than that. It's about changing the system that is hurting all of us. It's not just about hurting women and then women being victims of violence and gender-based violence. We know that men are the predominant subjects and objects of violence. They're the ones that are killed most predominantly through violence, even though they're the ones who commit direct violence as well. But it is the structures of violence, whether it's structural, cultural, epistemological, psychological, that are out there, and that feminism has tried to address it in very, I would say, dramatic and interesting ways, and also gentle ways. So these are the visions Clara mentioned. They're utopian visions. I no longer call them utopian because utopia assumes it's a no place. I call them utopian visions, which means better society, improved society, society that is possible. It's not perfect. We will never have that end of history. That's why we have beyond feminist futures. So we will never have that end of history, never have perfection. That's actually one of the future's fallacies, that you will arrive at some point in time in this perfect future. We understood that. We have now notions of heterotopias and utopias. And that is very important, that conceptual shift. Because Elise Boulding wrote about that in her many books. She was one of the founders of both Futures and Peace Studies, and she did talk about that. She said people want to be realistic, they don't want to be utopian, but they assume that it is fears that are realistic and hopes are unrealistic. And I think there is this kind of almost like I'm not going to say conspiracy by patriarchy, that's ridiculous, but there is something that is coming from this worldview that is disempowering feminist initiatives that are very practical, that are very doable, that are workable, calling them utopian. So the minute you call something utopian, you dismiss the whole political project. So I think we need to get a little bit more clever how we use our cognitive apparatus, how we use our language, because we are looking for improvement. We are looking, I mean, I'm not sure if I would call Sanna Marin's approach feminist foreign policy. Up to a degree, yes, but then I'm not sure about joining NATO. I know it looks different from there, and we have somebody, Sanna's here, so she can maybe contribute to that. It's very different when you are kind of away and when you are in the middle of it. But still, you know, we have seen leaders that try to embody it, and not just in that area, in many other areas. I just want to tell you that because I've been around for a very long time, there is so much to say, and I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to try to flick to, but this was one attempt in 1997. No, you can't see it. It's all fuzzy, is it? Yeah. Oh, what women want. The Futurists, 1997. It is a very interesting issue. I think we need to digitalize those. I think we need to kind of collect that history, because we have so many resources and things have been done for decades and decades. It's just that they're spread out, you know, in many places. I don't think the Futurist has, I don't think it exists anymore. I'm not entirely sure about that. But, you know, I think that would be really important if we could, can you see my screen now? If we could work on that project as well. It's 5 o'clock now. We started at 4:30. So is there somebody, while I'm fiddling with my PowerPoint, is there somebody who is eager to say something right now? Comment or raise an issue before I go through my presentation, and then we do activities jointly. That was the plan. I can see everybody has is still muted. Okay, so let me then go with my presentation. We did raise lots of questions. Can you see it? Can somebody tell me if you can see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. For this session, we put lots of questions out there, and obviously we are not going to be able to address them all, but I'm hoping to touch upon them, or some of those questions which are in the description of this session. And to start with our understanding of past, present, and future, I would like to go back to one of the key influences to our area, and certainly to my work and understanding of lots of things in the area at the intersection of futures and feminism. And that is the notion of 200-year present framework. That is a concept that Elise Boulding developed, and she said that's a very interesting way of thinking about change. It's again based on women's ways of knowing, because women kind of have this intergenerational approach a little bit more prominently relevant in their lives. And then she talked about we need to expand our notion of present from this instant gratification to something broader, and think about change in those terms, because then we don't get despondent when something that we've been trying to work on for quite some time is actually not yet happening, when there are pendulum shifts and so on. So that 200-year present is based on sort of a family structure. 100 years people who are still alive today but were born, like grandparents and great-grandparents who were born and who we met in our lives, and then descendants as well. So she likes that term because she thinks in terms of events that span and realize how long change takes, how difficult it has been to create these bodies in new ways, and how in many ways we are slipping backwards, like a useful concept. But then she said she takes comfort to know that superpower hegemony has a very limited lifespan, mentioning decline and fall of Rome, the Ottoman Empire. And because she was Norwegian, her background, she often talked about the transition from her society, from a warrior society to a more peaceful society in number of centuries, obviously, and or maybe decades, but that has happened throughout the history. So whatever has happened, it's still possible to do. So, you know, that notion that we can't have utopian futures because of X, Y, Z is actually not true, because we've seen it in the past. And that's why she talked about peace histories as well. So the question we raise here is in terms of, you know, whether we have seen a shift and how much of that shift is happening. Definitely, I believe that patriarchy has been weakened during 20th and 21st century, but it's still quite resilient. And sometimes the more you wiggle and try to escape it, the more you get entangled, that this image is actually showing us. Now, superpower hegemony or dominance of patriarchy, something got stuck here. Okay, here. It's one way to think about where we find ourselves in. And as a system, apparently it's been around for 5,000 years, but it's resilient and it's fluid and it changes, has a different manifestations. There are also pendulum shifts. That's that not linear view of history, but cyclical view of history, where sometimes we see equal rights and sometimes we don't see them. Apparently, according to a number of analysts, we are currently in the fourth feminist wave, which has started in the 2010s and focuses on empowerment of women via digital tools. You know, obviously, us being here is one example of that. Dominant orientation is intersectional feminism, unlike second, third wave that we're seeing different types of feminist orientations. Now, the first wave, liberal, obviously dominant, and the second wave, radical, and the third one, more multicultural, spiritual ecofeminism, and so on. And now we are seeing this intersectional feminist worldview that is being predominant. However, I've found when I'm working with various organizations, this is something I've done with Asian Development Bank or Pacific Communities, there is gender mainstreaming, but the language is still kind of catching up. So the change is there. There is this request for gender mainstreaming, and at the same time, we seem stuck, like based on visions from 100 years ago. So there's still quite a bit of talk about gender equality and about counting women. As I was saying, 20th century women's movement and social change that occurred because of it was based on that vision. There was a vision of gender egalitarianism and then gender equity, which is, as you know, something different, which was propelled by certain trends, pushes of the present back then, mid-20th century. And at the same time, there were weights of history and social structure, such as gender, power, order, patriarchy, traditional power structures and systems. They'll always drag desired futures visions down. And we are seeing that today as well. We're seeing how previous waves were successful because they were able to articulate futures visions in overt terms. So it was not something that was assumed, as future often is, but it was articulated very clearly, and it motivated people to work towards that vision. At the same time, there were certain external trends and events that were helping that vision. And then weight of history and social structure, if it can be minimized, that help as well. Now, at this present moment, we do have, I think, even a global vision for the future, which is based on gender equality. As I said, I think it's a little bit lagging, but it's still there. And many organizations are aligning their efforts to this global vision. So we are seeing lots of efforts and in many strategic plans for a number of organizations we work with. Gender equality or gender equity are the goals, strategic goals for that organization. We are also seeing pushes of the present. Women's movements are getting stronger in many areas. They are sometimes reacting to that pendulum shift and backlash, but at the same time, they're continuum from lots of efforts from the 20th century. Unfortunately, we also have these barriers to change that are very powerful and very strong, and they're very powerful and very strong because they're built into the system. They're built into our systems, and as we heard from Clara, they're built into the system of nation states. They're built into the cognitive understanding of what security means. They're built into how we fund things. They're built into economy. And we need to understand that the system itself is not neutral, but it is gendered, because this is what we inherited. It is not based on common sense, and all these other feminist visions are utopian or whatnot. It is also built on a particular world, the worldview of patriarchy. And many feminist theorists have said we need to address this in a holistic way. So Marilyn Waring, who was talking about, obviously, violence and war as well, she said we need to develop feminist economics. Hazel Henderson, the futurist, late futurist, now she passed away a few years ago, but she developed a different template for economy based on, again, feminist or women's worldviews, where we talk about unpaid, non-monetized, bottom of the cake, which is actually keeping the top cake functioning. So some of those efforts that have been around are showing that the system hasn't changed. So maybe we are counting women and we have gender mainstreaming, but the system underneath is still largely determined by what we have inherited. I know that one of my favorite quotes by Marilyn Waring is when she said that, you can have a change, women becoming soldiers and men are taking care of children more, but the whole system hasn't shifted, because you still define productive labor as somebody sitting in a nuclear bunker ready to fire a nuclear missile, because that person is paid for that work. But if you're engaged in caring work in so-called, what Henderson called love economy, you are doing unpaid work. So that means that, the society doesn't value it in many ways. And systems are created that way, even though you now sometimes see that the roles are reversed. You see different genders going to the traditionally female or male jobs and occupations. So we need to approach this package we have inherited in a holistic way. And one of the best ways to do that, in my view, is through feminist worldviews. We need to, I believe, go beyond women and future narratives. Why do I think that? I think that because as Bell Hooks defined patriarchy and feminism, she said feminism is a movement against sexist oppression and sexism. So if we can have worldviews that were designed or created by men way back in the past, let's say Marxism, Buddhism, Christianity, there are women who say they're Christian women, then obviously we can have feminist men. This is what Bell Hooks argued and a number of other feminists, because we have a system that is something that we inherited through patriarchy, which is a worldview. And that worldview is something that women kind of internalized as well. And you know that that's the case because I'm sure you've come across lots of women who are hesitant, who are reluctant to go into feminism, who internalize racism, colonialism, all those hierarchical ways to think about the world. And just this image to the right, only the one on the top right is kind of suspicious, but the rest, you know, this adoration of somebody like Donald Trump, who is going to remove most of their rights, is just incredible. The cognitive dissonance that happens is just mind-boggling to me. And it happens all the time because, as again, bell hooks argued, people are informed about feminism, not from feminists themselves. They are informed by third kind of resources, usually by media. And media needs clickbaits and they need something to be outraged about. So we have seen that feminism has been appropriated quite a bit at the beginning of this fourth wave as well. And I think there is a great danger in this, where feminism is used for individual women's empowerment and not to change the system of patriarchy that permeates most of our societies, and that actually is very challenging our very existence, honestly, challenging our very existence on this planet. Raina Eisler talked about this. She said we are at a crossroad between two alternatives. One is partnership alternative, the other one is dominator alternative, Gillarney or androcracy. And James Robinson in the 80s also postulated the alternative between he futures and she futures, he being hyper-expansionist futures. And we see that all over the place when we talk about the future. And then she future, which is sane, humane, and ecological. Now, talking about the future, myself and many of my other colleagues have asserted that future has already been colonized. Mary Daly in the 70s wrote about that. She says even outer space and future are already colonized by patriarchy. So when we look at science fiction images in the 20th century, we see images like this and like that. So those science fiction myths are kind of somebody's. Can you mute yourself, please? Because I can't hear myself unless you are eager to say something, but we'll give you time for that as soon as I finish this presentation. So we can have a huge debate over this, but research clearly shows that young people are imagining gender roles and futures along certain dystopian terms. And women have gotten into this empowerment, but based on certain masculinist values. They are to be empowered by adopting this masculinist strength and work within the system. Well, the whole point of even the first wave of feminism was to change the system we inherited. Because one of the best ways to create alternative futures is to change the worldview and change the assumptions underneath whatever we consider the norm. Because once we challenge that, once we challenge those dominant myths and narratives and assumptions, we immediately get different possibilities. I'm going to skip this. And I think what is needed now, this workshop, or in general, is to engage in two parallel processes. One is to decolonize the patriarchal present future from the images that we've inherited from this colonization that has already occurred. And the other one is to imagine gender equitable futures. And this needs to happen at several levels, not just at that superficial level where we are counting women, where we have token women sitting in, organizations and doing whatever, other people before them did. We need systemic changes, worldview changes, and myth and metaphor level changes. So these are the two parallel processes. So one is obviously this deconstruction. I don't know about you, but prominent books in futures literature is usually something on the left. We are seeing this Homo Deus, the future of mankind. So many images of evolution are always about men evolving, but not women so much because they're outside of time and history, connected to the nature. And then there is a question, what would be this new mythology for gender equitable futures, for a different system? What is something that we can use to go beyond this critique? Here is an image, you've probably seen it before, by the Foundation for the Future. They were very ambitious. They were talking about Humanity 3000. And as you can see, the future on the right is defined in James Robinson's terms as he future, hyper expansionist, this technomaniacal in some ways, where there are no humans, there are no nature. This is the system, that is the structure, and that's a myth and metaphor that informs lots of futures work. So they haven't challenged gender relationships here, even though they were talking about Humanity 3000. So just critiquing this is not enough. As Elizabeth Gross, a philosopher, says, we need to not just say that something is not true, valuable, etc., but we also need to pose alternatives, because if we just critique something, we actually affirm that that is the true and valuable or useful way of the world. We affirm that that is the only way our reality can be. So we need to keep on creating these alternatives parallel to the critique that also needs to happen. And to do that, we need to, as I said, create different possibilities based on different myths, narratives, and assumptions. So this is my kind of food for thought, something that I wanted to put out there before maybe we collectively start discussing what may our 100-year present, based on Elise Boulding's terminology, look like 100 years from now into the future. When we do workshops, we usually extend. Strategic plans are 5 years, 3 years, 5 years. With futures work, we usually do 20 years. Some of you are quite young, you can do 40 years, or we can just get our imagination, get a little bit more imaginative and start thinking about the year 21, 24, which is 100 years from now. What would be the desired future for now? We are still living desired futures visions from first feminist wave, 100 years before us, which was about gender equality mostly. And it's actually 18th and 19th century visions informed by French Revolution, informed by European Enlightenment. So that's kind of the societies are catching up now, a few centuries later. And I would be really keen to see how many of us here today can come up with something that is, relevant for our time, that toward feminist futures and beyond. What would be desired futures visions today? On a number of areas, we can go with foreign policy, we can do something else, we can do economy, we can do cities, we can do whatever we decide to do. But what would be that desired future vision? What would be some of the pushes of the presence and trends that are helping that vision? And what are still some weights of history and social structure that are barriers to change? So maybe if you want, we can now move towards the workshop process and apply Futures Triangle, which is one of the Futures tools and methods on this particular area collectively. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Where is?
We have many emojis
Oh,
saying yes.
okay, how many of us? 26 of us. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So Thais and Avril, you are a new generation of techno-literate, women who are, like part of fourth feminist wave and everything. How are we going to do this? So I can share the screen again. What is the best way for 24 of us to actually do this collectively now? Do you have any recommendations?
Let's just put maybe comments in the chat, and those who prefer to unmute themselves and speak, and we can maybe populate this PowerPoint. Ivana, I can type and populate with the key ideas if you want.
Okay, that's great. So maybe we first decide what is the topic. We can do desired future visions for our societies or a globe, like humanity. We can go broad like that, like the foundation for the future. They were talking about humanity 3000. We can do really broad and big and something like that, but we can also narrow it down to a topic that we would like to discuss here. Something that that is close to many of our hearts, something to do with conflict, with violence, with national security versus human security. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there, but it's really up to you to come up with a topic. And then we see what would be the desired future vision for that particular topic. Research question, if you wish. Any volunteers?
Jean is saying environmental justice here in the chat. Nina, women's rights. In the US, women's rights to choose and other previously achieved gains for women are seeming to go backwards. Yeah, so we have environmental justice and the backlash of women's rights. Chad is saying future of human security for women. I think you can choose one between them or maybe
I'm just
combine the three of
thinking
them.
if we can combine them, that's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because they're very close. You know, environmental justice is about survival. Future of human security for women is also about survival. Women's rights is about quality of life. So if we think about, let's say, Galtung's typology of violence, we have these basic human needs of survival and well-being that are being jeopardized by current systems. So I would say survival and well-being. Survival, human survival. So we are combining human security and calling our vision maybe human survival and well-being, 2044, 2064. How does that sound?
Yeah, good. Emojis saying yes.
We have heart.
Ivana, I've just got a sort of a question, and I don't know the answer,
Sure.
but you sort of said, when you said well-being, oops, let me turn my camera on. When you said well-being, I thought well-being, it didn't sound ambitious enough in a way, because I was thinking, what about thriving in a way, or something like, and I don't know. So I guess it's about how I guess we understand the words that we're using too.
Well, I think that would be definitely a desired future vision. So we can have a research question, human survival and well-being, but then desired future vision is to incorporate elements of thriving. So we can have individuals and societies thriving. That would be desired future vision, wouldn't it be? That's that utopia. It's kind of broad, but it's also not saying we will all be, we will have a perfect society, but we will have individuals and societies from surviving to thriving. So we are envisioning societies where individuals and communities are thriving. That would be desired future vision. And as I said, one of the key of successes of previous social movements were that they created vision for the future that was very tangible, that people could relate to, that they could see themselves living in that environment, because you know how it is with future. For lots of people, it's very fuzzy. It's fuzzy, it's token, it's taken for granted. They have some ideas about it, but they don't really know what that concretely means. And Elise Boulding, she found that out even when she was working with peace activists. They didn't want war, but they couldn't even imagine what a society or world without weapons would look like, without armies. How would we have security if we still, so it was hard to break from those visions of the future that are based on the past. And past, as we know, is patriarchal past. So without going into that too deeply, we need alternative histories as well to support our vision here of alternative future. But I think to get it as tangible as possible would be the key. So we have societies that are thriving and individuals that are thriving. That's the vision, desired future vision. What does that mean in a bit more concrete terms?
Is there an aspect
What-
of prosperity, you think, Ivana?
How would we measure it? How would we know we are there?
Chadi has her hand up. Maybe she has an answer.
Yeah, please, Shadi, just
Hey,
hi.
thank you very much. I've loved everything that's been discussed so far. I think for me that the one marker on how we measure that would simply be not having fear of many things. I don't know how you measure that, but just generally a feeling of security and safety.
Okay, that is very important, security and safety. I have an idea, actually. Now, Shadi reminded me with something we actually discussed before. But, you know, with everything that's going on when there is a situation of conflict and war, and when we don't have that security and safety, and when homicide is sort of allowable, I think we need a system where homicide in wars is criminalized the way homicide in our societies is criminalized as well. I would like to see that shift personally. I don't know whether others agree with me, but that is something that how I would see our societies moving more towards that prosperity and thriving and not having fear, but feeling safe and secure. Because as you know, in wars, women, you know, become all their achievements can disappear in a second. You know, they just become generic women, part of nature, part of territory to be conquered, etc., etc. So homicide in wars is criminalized. I would like to see that. And then we have definitely this thriving, if you can add that. Yeah, I would like, personally, I was thinking about that for quite some time, because I don't know why homicide in wars is legitimate, and how is it allowed to keep on going? Thriving societies. And I think our futures triangle, can I add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I can add here, Ivana. I just created
Yes,
this
okay, so
Miro
maybe
too.
just put,
So it's
maybe the title of the futures triangle is human survival and well-being. That's like a broad one. We can change it later, but for now, human survival and well-being. And then we have thriving societies. We have security and safety, human security and safety.
I have
And
here some comments.
I would go back to Marilyn Lake's work when she said security based on feminist worldview is security of income, security of having where to sleep. In Australia, one of the wealthiest countries of the world, we are now in the middle of homelessness crisis. We are seeing tents popping up in parks all over Australia, which is really very distressing. And that is definitely not a vision of feminist safety and security. So people need to have some of their basic needs met.
Here are some comments in the chat, Ivana, about like
Yes.
the nature ecosystem being instead of resources. So the rights of rivers, air, earth, and I comment that we are not moving away of human-centric vision and how we are doing it. And they put some examples about the agency of nature.
Yes. Emma said that we need to have this fluid notion of gender. So we go beyond that gender binary, which we still keep on perpetuating. Even with this gender equality thing, in many organizations where there is gender mainstreaming, there is still the notion of, you know, women and men, and then all the other genders in between are forgotten. So yes, patriarchy as a system serves no one, especially those that don't fit into those binaries. They're hurt a lot. Yep. So we have that desired future vision where we have, I called it in one of my articles, multiple gender diversities. It's published in JFS, it's freely available. It's a bit of a mouthful. It would be nice to have something else, but it was based on that. Either we have gender androcracy, which some people lobbied for, that we are all kind of, and cyberfeminism is in that area, talking about us not, gender being irrelevant. So we are all androgynous human beings, and in these spaces, it doesn't matter. You know, you can be male, female, or whatever you create yourself to be through your avatars and whatnot. So that's one option. All of us are one gender androgynous beings. Then you have that female, male gender binary or polarity. And the third one is gender diversity. So that's what, you know, there is an article if you want to consult it in JFS, which is a free source. It's freely available, it's open. So we have that. We have our vision of gender diversity, of fluidity going beyond. So not just critiquing gender binaries, but actually envisioning what would that gender diversity and fluidity look like. Universal basic income would be fantastic, global universal basic income, because we've also seen that women who internalize these hierarchical worldviews are empowering themselves at the back of other women. So this whole power feminism or women power, it doesn't fit with intersectionality at all. So global universal basic income is something that would really be important.
We have Leticia that is raising her hand.
Yeah, please go, Leticia.
I think it would be better to speak than to type. Yes, so I'm from South Africa, which is the most unequal society in the world. And you asked the question about how would we measure this. I think very important is to look to measure and understand the driving forces of inequality, be it between rich and poor, men and women, and not just look at it from a metric, but look at the driving forces behind that metric.
Mm-hmm. That is very important. And I think that's very good where you put it, Thais. We are seeing what's happening. What are some of those external trends that are impacting our desired futures visions? There would be some pushes of the present and trends that are supporting what we are discussing. Global universal basic income, security and safety beyond the gender binary. Definitely, I would put fourth wave of feminism there as one of the pushes of the presence and trends. I think climate emergency is a huge push of the present. People know that they have to do something, whether it's the pandemics or it's something else. I think those are all the pushes of the presence and trends that are making people realize that there needs to be a shift. But we need to know where we are going. We can't just say, okay, this is changing and there are all these pushes of the present and trends. We also need to know what is the direction we want to channel this energy towards. So anything else for pushes of the present and trends? Or if you want to say anything about desired future visions more? Yep, social media. Thank you, Clara. That's very important. Pushing transnational feminism. Yeah, Oppenheimer movie. That was, yep. Rise of femtech, of that feminist economy that we were discussing, alternatives in economy coming from feminists. And I would say push of the present is women getting into all these organizations. Even though gender gap is still there in terms of decision making and economy, women are entering organizations in larger numbers than 60 years ago. With all the backlash and everything, there is still that critical mass is possible once the critical mass understands that it's not just about equality and it's not just about empowering individual women. It's by empowering us collectively, we empower each one of us rather than create another hierarchy. Yep. More research is being finally put into women's health. That is also happening. I think feminist perspectives in the area of medicine and health are taking ground. Yeah, they're talking about, suddenly they discovered areas like women's heart attacks look a little bit different than men's heart attack. Or there is such a thing as menopause. So yes, there are those, as we discussed, revolutions happening in all sectors, in all areas.
We have Elizabeth raising her hand.
Hi. I also wanted to rather say it than write it because it's a bit long.
Sure, go for it.
I'm working on something currently in the area of bioacoustics and phytoacoustics. And the research that's coming up right now, especially in tandem with the use of different AI technologies, for example, NLP, to try and understand the noises that nature makes, shows that there is now evidence to move away from the idea that human beings are the only creatures on this planet that are capable of language. And so there's more and more research growing. And there's even the idea that whales have their own civilization. And so just tying that into something in desired futures, meaning we give nature agency. It's not just a resource. We are actually all together in one system. There are now studies and technologies sort of contributing to that. So it's bioacoustics and phytoacoustics, meaning plants have a voice, can speak to, and we're just the dumb ones who don't understand them.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think this rise of right-wing anti-feminism is a weight of history and social structure. Definitely it's coming back. This desire to go back to the past, and or stay in the status quo or whatever. And I think fundamentalism as well. When we did workshop in Manila, this is what came up as something that they were saying that potentially, more and more societies become autocratic. We're seeing that in Europe, actually, unfortunately, as well. These autocratic structures seem to be gaining ground. And they were concerned that more and more societies in Asia are going to become fundamentalist. So I think the rise of autocratic and fundamentalist societies. Yeah, okay, you can put it into two different, that's fine. Yeah, that came up very strongly as one of those weights of histories and social structures. The system fights back, yeah. That is also happening, more governments adopting foresight practices for anticipatory governance. And I would say that foresight in futures is becoming more and more democratized and participatory. As, when I compare it to the period when I entered the field 30 years ago. I think it is more participatory. And another thing that is really important, lots of activities are about embodied futures, which I think also comes, even though it's not acknowledged where it comes. And often these feminist alternatives, there is no acknowledgement where things came. But there was quite a bit of work done in the 60s about embodied politics, embodied and the spatiality and how critical that is to create alternatives. We're acknowledging non-Western perspectives more, which is very important, once again, to democratize the whole world, because we need a systemic change, holistic change, not just in one. It's probably impossible to shift such a power structure of patriarchy just by doing a little bit here and there. The shift needs to be more holistic and happening at many more levels. That's great. Oh, this is beautiful. It's such a nice futures triangle. Lots of great ideas. Thank you so much. We will look at, neoliberalism, capitalism.
Leticia has her hand up as well, Ivana. Go ahead, Leticia.
Place as well, yeah? Sorry, somebody is saying something?
Yeah.
Leticia is, Leticia raised her hand.
Yes,
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say that the current system still enables the existing actors, which is mostly men in this case, to still make a lot of money. So I have this thing of, if you follow the money, then you'll know who the real actors are in a system. So the current, and this is what I also grapple with in the work that I do, is that the current system supports a small minority who make a lot of money, and they are not incentivized to change in any way. So if I can substantiate that with history, if we take South Africa, for example, and you look at the apartheid system, it was stuck within a space where a small minority of people made a significant amount of money. And if you look at what tripped up that system, it's because the people who were making that money were making less money. So they realized that keeping that system in place would not be sustainable for them to make more money. And by implication, they started to look at alternatives, which was to have an open society and allow different cultures and different races within the economic structure. So I think there's something to be said about wars as well. If you take wars, some companies make a lot of money, sadly, because of all the weaponry that they sell and the intellectual capital that goes into wars. So, and I don't have the answer to this, but I think one has to look at how to make wars less attractive from a financial point of view, so that people start making less money in wars and so that they are open to alternatives.
That's fantastic. I think there are some efforts in that area, and I would like to just continue with what you said in this future is what women want. One of the proposals I had there was taxes for future generations. That's what I wanted to see, like you actually tax present generations so that the future generations can actually do something and survive and have a different level. So there are lots of ideas out there, and I'm very happy with this Futures Triangle. We will get the chat downloaded, and maybe we will write something based on this as well and invite you to contribute later. Maybe it can become a shared article for Journal of Future Studies, so we can create a structure and summarize what we've already came up here with, and add from the chat, which I can't simultaneously, look at the Futures Triangle as well as all the comments, but I really appreciate everything you said there. I'm very conscious that we have 11 minutes left, And I think we finish Futures Triangle later, and we will send you back if you want to become one of the co-authors. Maybe we start the process of envisioning those desired future visions for human survival and well-being, and kind of bring more texture into it. Maybe some images as well. There are many people here that are fantastic graphic designers too. So maybe we can start that process to enhance what we've done here collectively today. But right now, I would just like to, because I'm a very ambitious person, I just want to tell you what I wanted to do today, and which we are not going to be able to do it because it's only 10 days, but what I think would be critical if we meet again, or maybe we can, after this workshop, maybe we can also co-create a joint piece on this issue based on a different method called causal layer analysis. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can, Ivana.
Okay, great. So causal layer analysis, these are the two parallel processes I was saying are important. Yes, we need to critique what we don't want. We need to put some kind of light and magnifying glass onto what we've inherited, all those systems and structures that we do not want. So that's one process of decolonizing the patriarchal present future. And then second process is which we've done now with Futures Triangle, starting the process of imagining gender equitable future based on feminist epistemology. So going beyond women and futures, but actually going into different worldview and based on different assumptions. And causal layer analysis helps us with that process to create different myth and metaphor for different narratives based on feminist worldview. And this is critically important. A process that Asian Development Bank, that is part of gender mainstreaming, the way why they were successful in some of their initiatives is they went through the process where they said, oh, well, you know, gender is something nice on the side, but it's not really part of our business. It's not core of what we do, because at the litany level, the view was gender is not bankable. And thus, they had decision-making without gender expertise, and their metaphor was of counting women. Once we did the workshop with gender experts, they said they need to change the worldview from decision-making without gender expertise to gender-informed and justified decision-making, and they shifted the metaphor from counting women to women count. So that's a very different worldview, metaphor, and perspective that then changes system as well. From that perspective, then you go and suggest, as you can see here, dedicated trust fund, gender equality of female-led governments, regular mandatory gender training for leaders and managers, and standalone focused gender projects. So that is in the context of their organization. And then as one outcome, changing things in real terms at the litany level. If you know CLA, that would be the visible part of the iceberg, where they actually created gender bank and they actually started reframing their gender bank that used to be infrastructure bank and then became climate bank. And now they're playing with this idea of them becoming gender bank. But in the meantime, they created gender bonds, which makes tangible difference in the lives of women in the Asia Pacific region, where they can access some funding that is specific to their initiatives. I'm going to skip this. And I would like to close with why this is important. When we look at myths and metaphors and worldviews, shifting those assumptions is critical, because anytime you shift those assumptions, you get a very different set of strategies. For example, this is something I've done with another group looking at the prostitution, which used to be framed as the oldest trade. And once you say it's the oldest trade, there is immediate implication that there is nothing that can be done about it. Immediate implication that this has always been with us and it will always stay with us. So the only strategy you can propose based on that patriarchal mindset, worldview, and the myth and metaphor is to contain it somewhere. And we've seen many societies have it out of sight, out of mind, put somewhere where it's contained. Now, from a moral and religious discourse, we are talking about fallen women, and then obvious strategies to criminalize the prostitute. We know that in some parts of the world, most prominently in Sweden, because feminist discourse, the worldview has changed the way this issue was understood. From a feminist perspective, they have changed the metaphor and said, we are not talking about the oldest trade or fallen women. Prostitution is an example of violence against women and children, including young men. So from a feminist perspective and worldview, and metaphor and myth became different. And thus the strategy changed from criminalizing the prostitute or provider of services to criminalizing the user. Now, there are lots of debates here whether this has been effective and or it was a bubble wrap where you pushed it from one area to another. And the point is not for me to lobby one or the other. I mean, certainly my values, I know where they personally align. And they would be under the CLA number 3. This is personally, but there are some debates, including by women who actually provide sex work, that are saying that we do not want this framing. We want framing of not violence against us because we feel powerful through the work we provide and services we provide. We want it being framed as sex work. And in Australia, we've seen that some of those efforts have led to strategies that are about decriminalizing the whole activity. So you don't contain, you don't criminalize, you completely decriminalize and provide support for people in this area of work. So this is something that I was hoping we do, but as I said, I was overly ambitious. So CLA activity would be lovely. And if anybody wants to do it, we can do it collectively after today. We can develop CLA on human survival and well-being prosperity. Once again, I said we can do it for Journal of Future Studies, either for perspective or as an academic article, applying CLA, which proposes all of those changes and then play with different worldviews, not just feminism versus patriarchy, because that too is binary, but also looking multiple feminist perspectives into account and seeing what would be the solutions and changes at both metaphorical narrative level as well as the system level coming from these different perspectives. So thank you so much. I think that's all that I believe we have time for. We have 3 more minutes to close this. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer, but I'm aware that people have lives and other
And we have another
commitments.
session starting
Yes,
in
we
3
have another
minutes.
session as well. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ivana and Clara. It was amazing to learn so much from you in such a short time. And thanks for all the participation from the audience. You will receive one message from Luma, so please give us your feedback so we can pass it on to Ivana and Clara and also overall regarding the event. We want to do this many more times, so we want to learn from you. Yeah, and now in 2 minutes, we will begin another session with Lydia Caldana, which is already online. And yeah, I hope you can stay. And if not, please look at the program, come back to other sessions. We have plenty of sessions in the next for today and also next week. Thank you so much.
Thais, I provided my email there. So if people want to contact me, feel free. Clara, you can do the same thing. Thais and Avril, you have contact, and we will continue working on this, I hope. So thank you so much for everyone who contributed, and I hope this is just the beginning of our collaboration together.